Chosen family, chosen family. I am chosen with my three. Hey, chosen family. It's your girl Shonda, aka The Chosen One, back with another video. And today I wanted to give you guys some background on my childhood, a little bit of my history, and just a few things that I've been through. So as a child growing up, I was the oldest of four. My mom had three daughters and one son. And me being the oldest, I always felt like a protector. So with that being said, us having it super rough, my mom was never the type to like buy name brand shoes, Air Force Ones, Jordans, all that type of stuff. It was more like hand-me-downs from churches and Martin Luther King centers and, like community centers and stuff like that. So we had a lot of hand-me-down things, and I think we only really experienced like my mom buying us brand new outfits would be like if she was playing scratch off tickets and she won $1,000 or income tax time. I remember one time I got a name belt around income tax season. I want to say it was, now that I think about it. But we had it really rough, so we would always get talked about, picked on. I fought a lot. But even still, I had like one of the greatest personalities. I was super bubbly. To the people that were kind of nice to me, I did make friends. Although it was hard because even when I would make friends, we never really stayed in a place like more than 6 months. And if we did, even if we stayed the whole school year, we definitely didn't return to that school the following year because we probably moved. But my mom, from what I remember, she wasn't with any of our fathers except for my younger two siblings, and their dad was abusive. He was, I being as toxic as he was, she still stayed with him for quite some time in our lives. Like, I remember hearing stories about at one point we were in the car with them when they were doing a drive-by. So, like, they were the Bonnie and Clyde type couple, even though my mom had four children. Like, she was still riding with him, and of course he would like do construction work or carpenter work here and there, but he did music. So I remember like always hearing beats and him rapping and stuff like that. So my stepdad, he was a dad. I'll just say that. But he was abusive. They did display it in front of us. Like, I remember one time they were having some type of argument or disagreement, and my mom was sitting on the couch, and we all like piled on her, like sat on the couch, and he got his shotgun and he shot at the ceiling into the light fixture, and like all the like fluorescent stuff like or whatever had fell on us, and we felt it or whatever, and we was just like, oh, and I think we were crying. And I'm not sure if it was that same day or in a different scenario. They had got into it and my mom hit him in the head with a bottle, and he had like blood dripping down his face, and he was like crying, and I'm like, I don't know what your mom's doing. Like, and now being an adult, I'm just like, you were really crying, like, despite the type of man you were. It was crazy. But yeah, my mama went through it with him, and after him, it was like, it seemed like every guy that she dealt with was just like, ugh. Except for one. Like, she met one decent guy, but pretty good guy, actually. I don't know whatever happened to him. I don't know why it didn't work out. But I think that maybe it was my mom. I hate to say it, but like her lifestyle, I remember that's when she started like dibbling dabbling into certain drugs. We stayed in like project apartment, low income or whatever, and I just remember like witnessing like her, you know, doing pills and marijuana and she was like taking her blunts and like putting cough syrup on them and all kind of stuff. Like, I didn't really get it then, but now that I've been exposed to quite a few things in this world, that's pretty much what she was doing. But I think that's probably why that one particular guy probably didn't deal with her for long. But it seemed like every guy after that was like some type of hustler or a guy with no job, and he couldn't really help her. She was always on low income. It seemed like every guy was no good for her. I remember one of her boyfriends, his brother. I was probably like 10 at the time, but like he would like get me to like sit on his lap and try to like, he was just super inappropriate, and I was only like maybe 9 or 10, and he was like 17, 18 years old. But you know, at that age, at that age, I thought, oh, this kind of older boy or whatever, he liking me, he's, you know, attracted to me, and not knowing that he's a whole pedophile, like regardless of him being what, 16, 17 years old, however old he was, because he was like a teen but almost an adult. And I thought that it was cute. It didn't get weird until my sister's dad, who we actually ended up finding out that biologically it wasn't her father when we took him to court. But I remember, because of course my dad died when I was 7, so we would go to her grandmother's house sometimes for summer breaks or holidays or whatever. And her grandmother at the time worked a lot. She was a chef. I remember at one point she worked at the Georgia Brown. She was a really good chef. But I remember when we would go over there, at first he wasn't around because I want to say he was in jail for a while. And then when he finally had gotten out, I remember we were in her grandmother's room, and I don't remember if her grandmother was like cooking, but she wasn't in the room. Well, we were in her grandmother's room, and at the time her grandmother had a waterbed, and we were in the waterbed, and he walked in the room. And of course my sister's like, Dad, you know, she gives him a hug, and I sit up and I give him a hug too. And at the time we wore a lot of like big t-shirts and stuff like that to bed. And I remember after I gave him a hug, we were just like kind of like sitting up in the bed on our knees, and he was just like kind of talking to us. And at one point he like grabbed my shirt, and at this point I'm probably like 11 at the time, 11 or 12. And he grabbed my shirt and he like pulled it down to like flatten it out because I was starting to get breast, and I had like little knots on my chest. And at that age, I was kind of like starting to sprout out. I already had a butt because of my mom, but then I was starting to get like little hips. I was starting to get shapely. And he was like, "Oh, no, you ain't trying to get some boobs. What's going on with this?" Or whatever it was that he said. He basically acknowledged that I was starting to be developed. And that's when it started. I remember I would walk around her grandmother's house a lot of times, and he would like smack me on my butt, or he would like stand in a hallway catty corner, like if everybody, not everybody, if he knew, like, but it's weird because everybody would not be gone, but it's like whenever me and my sister was home, or when he was watching us, it was times where he found the opportunity to do the things that he was doing. And I remember like a lot of times he would like stand in the hallway, at the end of the hallway or something, where I could see him, and he would like just stand there with his penis in his hand, and he would like twirl his ear, and he would just stand there, and he'd just be stroking and stroking. And of course he wouldn't have my attention for very long, because I'm 11 years old. I'm just like, I'll look the other way, or I'll go in the other room, or I'll go somewhere where he couldn't see me. And it didn't make me, it made me uncomfortable. But I was an 11-year-old girl who, I didn't have my own dad, but I enjoyed being able to go to my sister's people's house. Like, I was happy I was included, and I had family to go and spend time with. So initially I didn't say anything. And of course I was a little scared, because I didn't want him to get upset with me or mad with me. Like, it's a weird feeling, because you would think, oh, this man is being inappropriate with you. Who cares what he thinks or how he makes you feel? But I'm 11 years old, and I wanted to be accepted. So, what made me open my mouth and say something was one time I was in the bed in her grandmother's bed, and a lot of times she went to work at like 5 in the morning. I want to say 5 or 6 in the morning, so she was always gone super earlier. So after she would leave, we would still be asleep in her bed or whatever. And I remember one time, I woke up out my sleep, and my sister had gotten up and went in the kitchen and went and ate her some breakfast. And we always used to like make us some cereal, and her grandmother would let us drink coffee sometimes. So it wasn't unusual that my sister had gotten up out of the bed and went to go make her some breakfast. Well, like, for some reason, I woke up right before he walked in the bedroom. And when he walked in the bedroom, he closed the door behind him. Well, he pulled out his penis, and he lifted up the covers. And as he stroked himself, he like was looking at me. Keeping in mind, at that age, we would like wear big t-shirts and underwear all the time to bed if we didn't wear pajamas. Well, at that moment, for the simple fact that he was like right up in my face, like his stuff was like I'm looking up and he's right there. So that made me super uncomfortable. And the fact that he came in and closed the door, I just felt like, okay, I didn't know what was gonna happen. So I talked to my sister, and come to find out, she was going through the same thing with him, but we were never together when he did it. So to make a long story short, it had gotten to a point to where I did say something. I spoke out, CPS got involved. They interviewed me. They interviewed my sister. Now, mind you, this went on for like a year or two. It went on for like a year or two. But this was holidays and summer breaks and stuff like that. He never penetrated me. The most it had gotten was him like rubbing, but never penetration. And always exposing himself. Well, once CPS investigated, my grandmother, because at that time I wasn't living with my mother. My mother had let my grandmother was taking care of us. And when it all surfaced, we did call my mom. We did tell her, but she didn't really believe it. Why? I don't know. But my grandmother was like, oh, hell no, whatever. So we ended up finding out that he was doing it to his other daughters. By the age of 19, no, not 19. By the age of like 21, 22 was when I went to court to testify against him for the things that he had done, because it had kept coming up, and they finally took him to trial. After that very long process, I have to go back, but after that long process of testifying and breaking down, and him laughing in my face, sitting at that table, he lost. And one of the main reasons why he laughed in my face was because they had already tried to put. And at some point, he laughed in my face for the simple fact that when my sister testified, there were some inconsistencies, and they could not continue throughout the trial with solely her testimony. So once I testified, and my story from when I was 14 years old versus to when I was 21, 22, because it was identical, the jury had ended up finding him guilty and sentenced him 25 years to life. Now, that being on trial was so hard because it seemed like I was doing it alone. And like a year prior to that, my mom had actually been murdered. My mom was strangled to death. My mom was actually strangled to death in the laundry room of an apartment complex. And when I was going through the trial, that was one of the things that the courts kept the need to keep bringing up. The prosecutor would bring it up to try to defame me and my mom, and her lifestyle and the way she died. And then the defendant, his defense team would try to defame me and my mom and make us seem like we were promiscuous people. And then the prosecutor, which was who I was testifying for, would bring it up throughout the trial. So that was a really, really, really hard thing to attempt to get through. And it was a really, really hurtful space in my life, especially since the person that they took into custody for my mom's murder, they did not have enough evidence to charge. So they ended up letting that person go. So that was bittersweet because I did have that triumph over someone who smiled in my face, knowing that they put me through so much trauma as a child. They showed me things that I should have never been exposed to. And they could still look me in my face and laugh. So it felt good, but it was very scary. It was very scary to get on that stand, but I felt strong at the same time. I didn't feel weak, but I was very afraid. Experiencing that on top of my mother being murdered, then, you know, my marriage was very beautiful in the beginning. But when I sit back and I think about the fact that when I was 17 years old, I got with this guy. He was 3 years older than me. So he was 20. He was, I guess you could say he knew a little bit more than me, but because he had been to the military, he had been released on an honorable discharge. And he was broken just like me. He had been through so much like me. Both of our moms at some point had been on drugs, and we just had so much in common, and we were both so broken. We decided to get with each other and depend on each other emotionally, financially, physically, all of those things. And it ended up causing both of us so much heartache and pain because we weren't ready. We weren't ready. We got married when I was 19, 2 years later after we met. And it was so toxic. It was so toxic. I think that we just weren't ready. We weren't ready. And even though 15 years later, after being separated for 10 years, we ended up getting back together. And we had a child together. And even still to this day, I feel like he wasn't ready though. I feel like to this day, 15 years later, he wasn't ready. Now I have a 4-month-old that I'm raising by myself, and I'm still legally married. So it's crazy because in between that, over those 10 years, from after I lost my mom and then me and my husband separated, not very long after that trial, because we had our own problems. I think that that's a completely separate video going in depth of that. But over those 10 years, I had went to prison. Because of our relationship and him being abusive and us separating and him having a baby outside of the marriage and then having another baby outside of the marriage, even before the second child, I started to lash out. I slept with some of his family members. I got in a relationship with one of his cousins, which was a female. I feel like, but I got some instant karma though, because dealing with that young lady, I ended up going to prison for having this nonchalant attitude. Like, I don't care. I do what I want to do. I took her rental car that was in her mom's name. I went to a whole nother state, got pulled over, got charged. I got probation. I left after I got out on probation, went back to Texas, started back dealing with her. started back. Started back dealing with her, violated my probation. I ended up going back. They extradited me from Texas back to the state that I got the charge, and they extradited me back because I was too high of a risk. They ended up sentencing me to go to prison. So my first time ever really getting in trouble, I wasn't a violent person. I was going to prison. Like, me going to prison, I was just planning on going to the military. I was about to take my ASVAB test, and a couple days before I was supposed to take it, me and her got into a confrontation because she didn't want me to go. She had already been a felon and all that, so I feel like there was a part of her that didn't really want me to move forward in my life because our relationship was toxic as well. But a few days before, we got into it really bad, and I feel like she did me really bad. She had introduced me to doing certain recreational things that I shouldn't have been doing, and I feel like so once me and her got into the really bad confrontation, I took the rental car. I took the firearm. I said, F the word, F people, I do what I want to do. And I drove off. And once I drove off, I got into like a high-speed chase with her and some other girls. It was crazy. But 100 miles away, I got pulled over and I got in trouble. Once I went to prison, going to prison was really hard because I had no family. I had already had a dysfunctional family. So going to prison, I was told, like, trying to make phone calls to people, oh, we're not going to take care of you just because you decided to go to jail. So that 13 months that I went to prison, 6 months in the county, 7 months in prison, that was hard time for me. No letters, no money on my books, no phone calls, no visitation, no nothing. And especially since I was in another state, there was definitely nobody coming to visit me. So it was really, really hard time. Once I was released and I got out, I had never gotten in trouble ever again. And this was in 2016. January 2016 was when I was released. I did my year of parole and I never got in trouble again. I may have got a speeding ticket once. Once I got a speeding ticket. But other than that, at that point, because I was a felon, I think that made it easy for me to decide to be a bad girl. I started dancing the year of 2016. I started escorting. I was just wilding out. At the end of 2016, I met my two oldest children's father, and he was okay with the lifestyle of dancing and all of that, but he was there for me. He was a good friend. He was one of my best friends, and we had 2 children together. That still didn't slow me down. I was still, living a fast lifestyle. But then once I was pregnant with the second, being that I was like good girl gone bad, I was still putting forth effort. Like, after my first daughter, I got out of the club full time. I started going to school online, earning my associate's degree, and I did it. 2 months after, or like 3 months. I had my daughter in March of 18. May of 2018 was when I graduated. A few months after that, I found out that I was expecting again. Then I wasn't, there was no more of the club. I was with their dad for a few years and it didn't work out. It was hard trying to be a stepmother to teenage children. He had like 9 other children. His youngest was like 6 years old when I got with him. So even though I had a good relationship with his youngest daughter, all the rest of them were like teenagers and older. So that was really rough. That was really hard trying to be a stepmom when I was a new mom myself. And I dealt with, like his sons, ridiculing me. Oh, you just want my daddy to take care of you. You're nothing but a stripper and blah, 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 blah. So going through what I went with him, once we broke up, it was like back to, being wilding out again, doing what I wanted to do, not really feeling like I was worth someone's time and attention of really like being there for me and protecting me and loving me no matter what. So I went through like a year or so just doing what I wanted to do, living my best life, and my daughter's father passed away. He was a drinker. He had ulcers. His last surgery didn't go well, and he passed away. At that point, I feel like I went into this depression. I didn't realize it was depression, but I couldn't throw things away. Like I became like a hoarder. My house was always cluttered. It was always junky. A lot of the times with having little small toddlers, your house, it never really stays spotless or immaculate. But I didn't know I was in a depression, and I didn't know nothing was wrong. All I knew was I'm doing my best. I'm still making it. I'm working. I started using my degree. I was in the medical field. So I was going to work every day, taking my kids to daycare. I was still functioning. So it didn't hit me that something was really wrong until I realized like something's got to change. Like things are going to keep going wrong unless I do something differently. And that night, I knew God was changing me, and he was changing my life, because I didn't want to smoke anymore. I didn't want to drink. I went on a I went on a cleanse. At that point, I gave my life back to Christ. I cleansed my body. I didn't want to smoke anymore. For some reason, my husband called me out the blue for help, for financial help. And I didn't look at it the way I should. I thought it was a sign that I needed to get back with my husband and work things out, thinking that he had changed, but that really wasn't the case. And then even still, I got back with him. He still was abusive, verbally, mentally, and emotionally, and it didn't help the fact that I had slept with 2 of his family members. I had been a stripper at one point, an escort at one point. Like, that just added fuel to the fire as far as his emotional abuse. So here we are now, me choosing to leave him now with a 4-month-old, still legally married, and trying to start over. It's hard. It really is hard. But I know God is on my side. And I am not going to quit. I'm going to love my kids no matter what. And I'm going to do my best to take care and provide for them. And it just is what it is. I thank God for blessing me.